Good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Dr. Amandeep Kaur, Assistant Professor in the Department of General Medicine, AIMS Bathinda. My topic of presentation is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is defined as evidence of hepatic steatosis either by imaging or by histology, and there should be no causes for secondary hepatic fat accumulation, such as significant alcohol consumption, use of steatogenic medications, or hereditary disorders. Now, it is one of the most common of all the liver disorders. It is also the most common cause of end stage liver disorder needing liver transplantation. It is present in up to 75% of individuals with obesity and type 2 diabetes. It is present in 3% of children and more than 50% of the obese children. Histologically, it is further categorized as non-alcoholic fatty liver and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Now, non-alcoholic fatty liver, as already defined, is evidence of hepatic steatosis either by imaging or histology in more than 5% of the hepatocytes histologically. And the risk of progression to cirrhosis and liver failure is minimal. Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis is defined as presence of hepatic steatosis and inflammation with hepatocyte injury with or without fibrosis. Now, this can progress to cirrhosis, liver failure, and rarely liver cancer. So, we have a healthy liver followed by a non-alcoholic fatty liver followed by non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, cirrhosis, hepatocellular carcinoma, or cirrhosis can result in the death of the patient. Now, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is a burden worldwide. Globally, it has a pooled prevalence of 25.24%, with Middle East and South America contributing to 30%, Africa 13%, USA and North America 24.7%, and Europe 24%. Prevalence of NAFLD in India is varying from 9 to 35%, so it is being a silent epidemic. It has a lower prevalence from a rural part of the West Bengal, and the prevalence of NAFLD is much higher in the urban populations. North India is contributing to 53.5%, with South India 32%, Eastern India 24.5%, and Western India 16.6%. So, what are the factors leading to the NAFLD? One are the environmental factors, that is the intake of the fatty diet. Along with that, we have the genetic factors. In genetic factors, it is the involvement of the gene of adiponutrin. Now, it has been seen that genetic variation in the PNPLA3 confers susceptibility to the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. There are certain risk factors which are associated with the NAFLD. There are certain conditions with an established association, such as the obesity, type 2 diabetes mellitus, dyslipidemia, and metabolic syndrome. There are certain conditions with an emerging association, such as the polycystic ovary syndrome, hypothyroidism, obstructive sleep apnea, hypopituitarism, hypogonadism, and pancreatidutal resection. Now, there has been population studied. In population with excessive BMI and visceral obesity, it has been seen that there is a prevalence of 90% NAFLD, and 5% of these patients may even have an unsuspected cirrhosis. An ultrasonographic study of patients with type 2 diabetes has a prevalence of 69%, and individuals with dyslipidemia who have been attending the lipid clinics, it has been seen that there is a prevalence of 50% of the NAFLD. Now, coming on to the pathogenesis. Insulin resistance is related to obesity and is central to the pathogenesis of the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. In addition, oxidative stress and cytokines are important contributing factors, which together results in steatosis and progressive liver damage in genetically susceptible individuals. So, increased free fatty acids with excessive calorie intake, increased insulin, that is insulin resistance, increase in the glucose levels, and decrease in the adiponectin results in an increased lipogenesis. Increased lipogenesis result in the increased levels of triglycerides and saturated fatty acids with increased VLDL. Further, there is an increase in the beta oxidation. Now, this beta oxidation results in the macrophage activation, which further activates the other factors resulting in the liver fibrosis. So, NAFLD is basically a multi-hit hypothesis with the insulin resistance metabolic syndrome resulting in the activation of an interaction between the cytokines, adipokines, oxidative stress, apoptotic pathways, oxidized LDL, and TLR overexpression, resulting in the first, second, and third hit to a normal liver, finally resulting in the fibrosis of the liver. So, in case of simple steatosis, it has been seen that around 15 to 20% cases will progress to the stage of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Out of this, 30 to 38% will be developing significant fibrosis, and 5 to 20% of these over a period of 20 years will be developing cirrhosis. Around 3 to 5% of these patients per year will be developing the hepatocellular carcinoma. Now, there are independent predictors for progression of fibrosis. That is, the age is more than 45 to 50, BMI of 28 to 30 kg per meter square, degree of insulin resistance, and presence of diabetes and hypertension. Now, it has been seen that the 5-year survival rate in case of patients with simple steatosis is normal as to the general population, whereas in patients with non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, it is 67%, and alcoholic steatohepatitis, it is 59%. And the 10-year survival rate in simple steatosis is normal, whereas in the NASH, it is 38%. And in alcoholic steatohepatitis, it is 15%. Now, mortality comparison in general population. In general population, liver diseases are responsible for around 0.2% of the mortality. Simple steatosis as does not result in the mortality, whereas non-alcoholic steatohepatitis result in a mortality rate of 1.6 to 6.8%. Now, what are the causes of mortality in cirrhotic NASH patients? That is the liver failure, sepsis, variceal hemorrhage, hepatocellular carcinoma, and the cardiovascular diseases. Now, whenever a patient presents, what are the symptoms? The patient can be completely asymptomatic, or the patient can present with vague symptoms of fatigue, malaise, and abdominal discomfort. And very important is the detailed patient history of the alcohol consumption. We can use the specialized appropriate questionnaire such as the CAGE questionnaire for a detailed patient history of alcohol consumption. On examination, the patients can have abdominal obesity. There can be an enlarged liver with a right upper quadrant tenderness on palpation. And in case of progression or advanced liver disease, there can be presence of spider angiomas, ascites, hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, palmar erythema, jaundice, or even hepatic encephalopathy. There is a NASH scoring system in morbid obesity, that is the hypertension, type 2 diabetes, AST-ALT value of more than 27 international units per liter, and sleep apnea, each contributing to a 1 point. And if the population is a non-black population, there are 2 points. So in total, if the score is 0 to 2, there is a low risk of the NASH. If it is 3 to 4, there is an intermediate risk. Score of 5, that is high risk, and 6 to 7 is a very high risk. So what are the routine laboratory findings? There will be elevated ALT and AST. However, in 10% of the patients with NASH, ALT and AST may be normal, especially with the simple steatosis. AST to ALT ratio is less than 1, and this ratio is usually more than 2 in cases of alcoholic hepatitis. Now, an abnormal ferritin level in the presence of normal transparent saturation should always suggest a need to rule out the non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Along with this, we must go for the test to exclude the secondary causes of the hepatic steatosis. Coming on to the imaging studies. Now, imaging studies are for confirming the fat accumulation in the liver. Ultrasound is the usual screening test for the fatty liver. The magnetic resonance imaging test or spectroscopy remains a gold standard to assess and quantify the steatosis. Along with this, we have the specialized imaging modalities like ultrasonography, based transient elastography using continuous attenuation parameter. We have a magnetic resonance elastography and the shear wave elastography. There are certain scores which have been identified, like the NAFLD liver PAT score. Then there is a fatty liver index, fibrosis 4 calculator, AST to ALT ratio index, circulating levels of cytokeratin 18, as well as the certain other serum biomarkers like the ALF panel, fibrometer, and the fibrotest, which are nowadays being used for the non-invasive assessment. Now coming on to the liver biopsy. When to obtain a liver biopsy in patients with NAFLD? Liver biopsy is the gold standard for diagnosis NASH. Now it should be considered in patients with NAFLD who are at increased risk to have the steatohepatitis and advanced fibrosis, or in those cases in which we have an uncertain diagnosis. Coming on to the management part. Now, management part involves weight loss, diet, exercise, bariatric surgery, pharmacotherapy. Then there are certain emerging therapies, and finally the liver transplant. Now, weight loss. Now, weight loss is the central to the cure of the NAFLD. So, if in case of steatosis, weight loss of 3%. In case there is ballooning and inflammation, weight loss of more than 5%. In case of NASH, weight loss of more than 7%. And if there is a fibrosis, weight loss of more than 10% is to be maintained. Now, next important is the dietary interventions. In dietary interventions, it is low calorie diet with 30% energy deficit is recommended. Now, in this diet, the carbohydrate intake should vary from 45 to 60% of the daily total caloric ingestion, and it should come mainly from the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and low-fat milk. Diets which are to be avoided, that is the potatoes, watermelons, bananas, raisins, white bread, white rice, corn and corn products, ice creams, fruit yogurts, and chocolate bars, which are high in simple carbohydrates, need to be avoided. Total fat should contribute around 20 to 35% of the total calorie intake, with saturated fats contributing to 7 to 10%, polyunsaturated fats 5 to 10% of the total calorie intake, and monounsaturated fats in a 8 to 10% of the total caloric intake. So the ratio of the saturated to polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats should be 1:1. The moderate protein intake, that is, it should be 20 to 25% of the total energetic value, and the fibers, it should be contributing to 20 to 40 grams per day. Exercise. Now, exercise has been shown to result in reduction in visceral adiposity and hepatic steatosis independent of the weight loss. Recommended are the aerobic exercises, that is 45 to 60 minutes per day a week, which should include a 65 to 70% of the maximal heart rate along with the other resistant exercises. Now, pharmacotherapy, who to treat, that is patients with the progressive non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, early stage of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis at high risk of progression, active NASH with high inflammatory activities, and advanced liver fibrosis. Coming on to the drugs. First of all, the insulin sensitizing agents like metformin. Nowadays, metformin has no significant effect on liver histology and is not recommended as a specific treatment for patients with NASH. That is the next is the thiazolidinediones. That is the rosiglitazone and pioglitazone. Rosiglitazone has shown improved enzymes and steatosis, but not inflammation. Pioglitazone has significantly improved aminotransferases, steatosis, ballooning, and inflammation. However, have a side effect of weight gain and bone fractures. Next, we have a saroglitazar. It is a dual PPAR alpha gamma agonist. It is recently approved for the treatment of the NASH, and it has resulted in reduction in ALT and steatosis without significant weight gain and increase in the fibrosis. Now, vitamin A. Vitamin A is an antioxidant. It has resulted in decrease in aminotransferases and causes improvement in steatosis, inflammation, and ballooning, and resolution of the steatohepatitis. However, vitamin A itself has no effect on the hepatic fibrosis. Now, safety of vitamin E. Long-term use of vitamin E is associated with an increased risk of prostate cancer, increased the risk of hemorrhagic strokes, and association between vitamin E use and an increased risk of all-cause mortality in patients with the chronic diseases has been seen, and it has to be used with caution in cirrhotics and non-diabetics. Ursodeoxycholic acid has no histological benefit. Coming on to the statins. Cardiovascular disease is a common cause of death for non-alcoholic fatty liver and NASH. So we must stratify the risks and treat accordingly. And it is premature to recommend omega-3 fatty acids for the specific treatment of NAFLD or NASH, but they may be considered as the first-line agents to treat hypertriglyceridemia in patients with NAFLD. There has been a Greece study which concluded statins significantly improved the liver biochemistries and cardiovascular outcomes in patients with elevated enzymes likely due to the NASH. Coming on to the bariatric surgery. Now, it is recommended to those patients who are unresponsive to lifestyle modifications and pharmacotherapy. Indication is a BMI of more than 40 kg per meter square or 35 kg per meter square in the presence of severe comorbid factors. Now, studies have shown to improve or even reverse NAFLD, NASH, and fibrosis as well. Then there are certain drugs in the phase 2 or phase 3 development. First of all is the obeticholic acid. That is a FRIEND trial. In this, 141 patients were assigned to receive the obeticholic acid. And it had been seen that patients, around 50 patients, that is 45% of the patients had an improvement. And even the patients with fibrosis showed improvement in 35% of the cases. However, there are certain adverse events, that is the cardiovascular events in the form of the non-fatal MI or non-fatal stroke, coronary artery disease, angina. Then there are certain neurological events in the form of dizziness, syncope, headache, neuralgias, renal events, that is the UTI or cystitis, pruritus, hepatobiliary events, as well as the other GI events. Then there is another drug, that is the liraglutide, which is a long-acting GLP-1 analog. It has a structural homology to native GLP-1. It causes a dose-dependent weight loss, causes a decrease in the HbA1c, improves the beta cell functions. However, there is a paucity of data in patients with the liver disease. There was a LANE trial with the liraglutide that showed that there is a resolution of NASH and decrease in the progression of fibrosis as compared to the placebo. However, there are certain adverse events which are predominantly gastrointestinal in the form of diarrhea, constipation, and loss of appetite. Coming on next, that is the elafibranor. It is a PPR alpha delta agonist, and in multicentric phase 2 trial, it showed improvement in steatosis and inflammation. Then there are certain anti-apoptotic agents like the selonsertib, which is an inhibitor of apoptosis signal regulating kinase. And in the phase 2 trial, it showed decreased hepatic steatosis and decreased fibrotic stage, but phase 3 trial did not show similar results. Then certain other antifibrotic agents like the monoclonal antibody against LOX-L2, that is the simtuzumab, which is under trial. Then there is a galectin-3 inhibitor, that is the GRMT02, which is also under phase 2 trial. Then there are certain others like probiotics and symbiotics, which are now showing promising results but need RCTs. Angiotensin receptor blockers, which modulates the insulin sensitivity. Rimonabant, which is an inhibition of cannabinoid 1 receptor. However, it has a depression as an adverse effect, and there has been no present study in patients with NAFLD. Then there are incretin analogs like the GLP-1 agonist, that is the exenatide, which promotes insulin secretion, induces satiety, but we have only animal studies at present. Then there are certain other emerging therapies like the insulin sensitizers, that is the SGLT2 inhibitors, remogliflozin, modulators of lipogenesis, that is the polyunsaturated fatty acids like the ethyl eicosapentaenoic acid, Ramcol, Altipress, antioxidants like the cysteamine, anti-inflammatory agents, that is the caspase inhibitors or the chemokine receptor 2 and 5 antagonists like the embricazole. So coming on to the monitoring strategy. So whenever a patient is to be followed up, we must evaluate the weight loss, exercise, diet, and lifestyle changes every 6 monthly. Blood platelet count, liver biochemical test, and prothrombin type should be done twice annually. We must consult a hepatologist at 6 months and then yearly, depending upon the response. We must screen for the cardiovascular risks every 1 to 2 years, depending upon the risk factors. Liver biopsy can be done every 3 to 5 years, depending upon the response, and imaging test can be done as and when indicated. Thank you.